How to talk about Sheikh Amadou Bamba as a gift. When I began traveling to Senegal as an undergraduate student in 1996, nearly 30 years ago, I guess now. This was the way that Bamba was presented to me by community members, by ordinary folks, whether in the Muridiya Tariqa or not, that Ahmadou Bamba was a kind of universal gift to humanity. That he was an exemplar of not just scholarship and saintliness, but of mercy and compassion to all created things. I was introduced at that time to his writings, and just his writings alone were represented to me in that early stage as a kind of gift to humanity, right? The brothers and sisters in the Muridiya would speak of Bamba's 7 tons of works, of written works. Um, After I became an academic scholar and engaged in the process of, researching Bamba's writings, just in the Arabic Literature of Africa series of what contemporary academics have been able to catalog of Bamba's writings, there are no less than 200 distinct entries for books that Bamba wrote. Some of those are collections of as many as 200 distinct poems. And some of those poems contain as many as 5,000 lines of verse. Um, so amongst the principal gifts that Bamba, gifted to humanity, and indeed his principal, in some ways, gift was this extraordinary literary output that fused his two favorite disciplines, for lack of a better word, the two things that he studied most intently during his adolescence and early adulthood, which were religious poetry and Sufism. And so he writes this beautiful, mystical poetry praising the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in extraordinarily beautiful verse, writing in either his second or third language as he writes in Arabic. An extraordinarily gifted poet makes Shakespeare look like a hack, an extraordinary gifted uh, spiritual gift bearer. And then the last thing that I'll say, just as a way of beginning the conversation, because I wanted to bring in, our other folks that are here, um, uh, that focus on character and ethics that Amy mentioned as sort of, framing the nature of this intervention from the Fowler. This was also the way that the gift that is Bamba was introduced to me. That his was a universal instruction in ethical training that was rooted in Islam, but that was ultimately universal and destined for all humanity. It wasn't something that was supposed to be limited to Senegal. It wasn't something that was supposed to be limited to Muslims. It wasn't something that was supposed to be limited to Black people. One of the things that Bamba said is he said that when a heart possesses knowledge but lacks virtue, the knowledge only increases it in bitterness. It is like a lush tree that bears abundant bitter fruit. He
Mm,
said, but when a heart has knowledge and virtue, it is like a sweet, lush tree. The more it flourishes, the more it nourishes. So Bamba was always striving to write things that were about this intersection of ethics and spirituality and to be a living example of excellent ethics and spiritual enlightenment. And the last thing I'll say in an introductory fashion about that kind of ethical approach. We've all, as you mentioned, encountered images of Bamba everywhere, and Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse and others of the great Sufi saints, not just performing an artistic or even a graffiti function throughout Senegalese space, but frankly, a talismanic function, right? That they're there as icons of protection and sanctification of space. And the beautiful work, Saint in the City, which I've taught a number of times, really captures the way that this functions. So I'll just mention briefly what one of the things that Ahmadou Bamba said about talismans. So a disciple approached Ahmadou Bamba asking for a talisman for protection. And Bamba said to him, "You want a talisman?" The man said, "Yes." So you can imagine the sort of disciple, thinking that Bamba's going to write something in Arabic for him, or, there are many different kinds of talismanic uses of the Quran that are, traditionally rooted in the Islamic sciences and that might be deployed under such a circumstance. Bamba didn't do any of that. He said, to him, he said, "I'll give you the best talisman." And then he said, "Buldef ken lubon, bulwach ken lubon, bulyene ken lubon," which means cause harm to no one, speak ill of no one, form no ill intentions towards anyone. If you are capable of these three, then any ill intentions formulated against you will fall back upon the one who formed them. That is your talisman. So Bamba's teaching, preaching, persona were all designed to help bring into being human beings that lived in ethical, compassionate, merciful ways and moved in the world in that way. And that's just the beginning of what I would say about him, both as gifted and as gift.